What up, watch peeps? Lately, I've been into watches that are coming from people who started as enthusiasts. People who are starting a watch brand came only after years of being into watches. I think there's something way more magical about the watches they choose to make than, oh, here's another Rolex. So today's watch is magical indeed. Let's check it out. I'm Pete, and we are chilling with watches. Wrist check. I am wearing the Divex 200 today in honor of a most momentous occasion. I got a shout out on the great podcast TBWS, the Two Broke Watch Snobs. Apparently Mike has picked one of these up. He mentioned after seeing them on a couple YouTubers, and my channel was one of the ones he mentioned. If you guys haven't seen my video, I bought this old beat up one with a ton of charm on eBay, and I restored it, put a new movement in it, got working, and I actually wear it a ton. It's one of my favorite watches. But what we're here to look at is this bad boy. I think this is just prototype packaging when the production models will have appropriate branding on them. But we do have a really nice watch box carrying case inside here. There is a couple Natos in there. I'm not sure if production comes with Natos because one of them is a bargain jack. So they might have just been tossed in so you have some strapping options. You have your polishing cloth. And then underneath, check this out. We have the Imperial Royalguard 200. So what we have here is a modern skin diver with lots of vintage charm, inspired by the Eberhard Scaphograph 300 with some big crowns sprinkled in. Now colors, like the Sea Quartz, this one comes in just this one colorway. We have a black dial, and it's like a nice deep gloss black. It has a steel blue bezel that is, supposed to emulate a ghosted bezel. Size, they come in at 38-ish millimeters, I say, because they're actually a little under, as we'll see in a little bit. Price-wise, pre-orders will open up at $350 on October 5th, going up to a full retail of $450. Let's take a closer look at this dial. As I mentioned, it has this midnight black gloss dial, as you can see from the reflections there. It has gilt printing that leans towards yellow aged lume, but in my opinion, it goes really well with the blue in the bezel. Logo and text, I know I normally gloss over this, but it really stands out here. The brand logo and font are amazing. I realize they come from the Eberhard, but you know what? If it ain't broke, don't try to fix it, and this kind of font and logo really kills. This is a no-date, time-only watch. The markers are reversed triangles at the cardinal points, and you can see here the minute hand, how it kind of eclipses those hour markers there at 3 o'clock. They are really cool hour markers. They're eye-catching, and they really help to fill out and balance the dial. The minute track, I'm thinking I love wide minute tracks. It lengthens the lines, and as we all know, mo lines is mo better. Now the hands is where the magic really starts. And this is how you homage, by the way. You take the original and you put a spin on it that doesn't detract from the original and hopefully improves it. He swapped the arrow from the hour hand to the minute hand and had it custom made so that it perfectly eclipses these cardinal point hour markers. A really cool effect. But he didn't stop there. As you can see, I'll let the seconds hand run here. And he had the seconds hand custom made as well so that it perfectly eclipses the non-cardinal point hour markers. Just very cool attention to detail. Now, I'd be remiss here if I didn't point out that at certain times, like let's say 3 o'clock, you may have to take a second glance to, as it's hard to tell which hand is which, but for me, so worth it. The crystal reminds me of that from the Seals Sea Storm in that it does a great job of emulating the distortion of an acrylic crystal while maintaining, the durability of a sapphire crystal. The bezel is appropriately aluminum, very old school bezel, what you would expect to find on a vintage piece like the one this is honoring, so obviously it is not loomed. It does have a really nice slope to it. The grip is coin edge, and it does extend just past the case to make gripping it a little easier. It's got a nice tight action to it. Very clicky, very solid feeling. Like any bezel, it has a slight bounce back to it, but it is rock solid. The mid case reminds me of a very nicely finished Invicta 8926 Pro Diver without the crown guards. And I mean that in the absolute best way. These are both, here I have one here. These are both NH35 watches. You know, the cases, the dimensions need to accommodate the same movement, and the Invicta is inspired by the sub. It's a solid case. And I bet, knowing that Ben started as a modder, there might be some influence there, and I think that is super cool. You'll see here we have circular brushing on top of the lugs. Beautiful thin polished chamfers that run the length of the mid case. Brushed case sides, drilled lugs, and I think a really nice balance of bezel, mid case, and case back. On the other side, we have a nice big crown callback here with a 7.3 millimeter crown. No crown guards. It's absolutely cake to use this thing. It is signed, as you can see here, with the Imperial logo, which I think looks super cool. Case back has a little branding on it, no spec sheet, and you know what? I think I kind of love it. You'll see from this view also that we have solid female end links. Perfect. The bracelet has a full 4mm taper from 20 down to 16. Absolutely perfect. If I remember correctly, I believe it uses split pins for sizing. No problem at all. And it has very small links, so it's easy to get a good fit. And as you can see here, it is a fully articulating bracelet, meaning it's a true 3-link. Every piece is independent and folds back on itself. Now, I thought I might not like these polished outer links on the bracelet because I don't usually go for polish on a bracelet, but it kind of works here. And you know, I know it has that alternating brush polish effect on the end links. At first I thought I would probably just brush these links out, but I fear I would end up regretting that, as this polish on the bracelet, it does add a little bit of shine that otherwise only comes from the chamfers on this watch. And the mid links honestly are super wide, so it's only a very thin portion that is polished anyway. The clasp is phenomenal as well. I wish I could find my Matic bracelet clasp, because this reminds me of a vintage clasp with its thinness and this kind of very flat, large fold over. It's very Goldilocks. It's minimal, but it's not too little or too much. It is just right. You have a milled out scissor, obviously, and it's got 4 very close together micro adjusts. So you combine that with short links and it will be a breeze to get an easy, good fit. The accuracy on this one is fantastic for an NH35. Seems to have settled in at about plus 6 seconds per day. Very good. 257 amplitude, very typical for the power on a Seiko. I'd say it's running just fine. It does have a medium beat error of 0.4, also pretty typical for an NH35. Now, I measured this case at actually 37 millimeters. It is 37.7 millimeters at the bezel. As you'll see, it extends just slightly past the case for easy grippage. The lug to lug came in at 46.9 millimeters as I measured it, and it is 14.1 millimeters thick. I know some will balk, oh, it needs to be 12 or whatever, but you know, it doesn't. It works and wears perfectly fine at this size. Thickness for me is one of those things we hem and haw about, but it just really all comes down to how it wears. There are 14s that wear better than 12s. You can't just say this watch needs to be this. All right, enough of that rant. It has a 20 millimeter lug width. Going over some of the other specs, we have one of the coolest sapphire crystals I've seen, like a box sapphire, I guess you would call it, with that acrylic distortion around the edges. It is using Swiss aged Superluminova and running the Seiko NH35 movement. You know, those of you who know me, I've said this before, I prefer this movement to a Miyota because I'll never have to service it. I can just toss a new movement in there for 25 bucks and be done with it. And even if you don't have the skills to do that, you can find a modder who will do it for you way cheaper than any kind of service. This watch, as it's called the Royalguard 200, it has 200 meters of water resistance. On this bracelet, size for my 7¼ inch wrist, it came in at 131 grams. Here's how it wears on my 7¼ inch wrist. If you had any concerns about the size, I think you can see here that they are unwarranted. This is a great wearing everyday sized watch. And as far as the thickness goes, it's not a thin watch, but it sits just fine on the wrist. It's not top heavy or anything. It's got great balance. Here it is alongside a 36mm diver. I think you can probably see the 1mm difference in size. Both of these are running the Seiko NH35. And, if you haven't tried a small diver, I would say go ahead and do it. I think you will be surprised at how much you enjoy the kind of all-day wearability of watches in this size. Next up at 40mm, I have one of my Invicta Pro divers that I think would maybe slightly influence this case design. Again, still both running the Seiko NH35 movement. I think here you'll see how he got a much prettier side profile view out of the Imperial than with the Invicta. Lastly, moving up to 42 and change, we have the Seiko SKX, and again, showing all of that size difference. Both running the same movement, the Seiko NH35, and kind of where the SKX is a rounded, bulbous, kind of top-heavy watch, you get a totally different wearing experience out of the Imperial. All right, lastly, let's check out that loom.
Peep the loom.
And check it out. This thing is blazing. That Swished Age Super Luminova. I've always thought of it as quite comparable to C3 in its brightness and in its, I guess, longevity. Really cool. I'm really digging the way that Loom plays with rehots lately. So there you go, the Imperial Royalguard 200. This is a great offering. It's got everyday wearability in its size. It's got cool vintage vibes that I haven't seen elsewhere. And in this day and age of rising watch prices, it comes in at a great price, especially if you pre-order early. I think the first 25 even get like a custom branded leather that sounds pretty dope. All right, before I let you guys go, sneaker check. I'm wearing my Anderson .Paak Vans because it's going to be like 70 today and I'm feeling summery. All right, that's it. I'm out. If it's not too much trouble, please like, subscribe, and come back next time. Peace.